Yeah, that's my. You're live. Go ahead.
Okay, good. Thank you for inviting me to speak today, all of you folks. And my name is Justin Lindholm. I live at Chittenden, town of Chittenden, Vermont. And I have been on Fish and Wildlife Board for several years. I'm also member of Vermonters for Clean Environment. I'm the president of that outfit, even though that really doesn't give me a whole lot of power, but um, they, Annette Smith, who runs the place, put me as president. And I've done a lot of work for Vermonters for Clean Environment on environmental issues over the years. And we sometimes we don't make the right happy, and sometimes we don't make the left happy. And actually, that shows we're doing something right because we try to deal with what we think is the best way of doing things in Vermont, proper renewable siting, things like that. We're not against renewables, but we want proper siting, things like that. Anyway, what I'm going to talk about today is H276, and I'm going to give you a couple of backgrounds on myself. One is that I have a perspective from both sides on this bill. I have used a chainsaw for thousands of hours. I have permanent nerve damage in both hands from using a chainsaw. I wake up twice a night at least and have to shake my hands out to get back to sleep because they're on fire. That's from using the chainsaws. They rattle all the time when they're in your hands. I have done a lot of work, usually over 50 years of using a chainsaw. So I do cut trees, and a lot of them, and have all my life. Even though I'm in my 70s, I still use a chainsaw. The other thing that you should know, I'm going to act like I'm into myself a little here, but you need to know I grew up in deep woods from 5 years old on with no adult supervision. We lived back in deep woods. My mother, me, and my 7-year-old brother, when I turned 5, my father had just died the year before. It's now considered child endangerment to let a kid do what me and my brother did. We went into deep woods with no adult supervision constantly, starting at an early age. Because of that, I really understand woods. I have only been lost once in my life. That was for 3/4 an hour when I was 14, and I enjoyed every second of it. It felt weird. I have a sense of position. I think Native Americans had that when they were growing up also as kids deep in the woods. And I do understand the woods. When you really don't know the woods, it seems like a humble jumble out there, but it isn't. It's an orchestra. Everything is interacting. The plants interact with each other. The wild animals interact with each other. The wild animals interact with the plants interact with the wild animals. It's fascinating to sit out in deep woods all day long and watch some of this. At least it is for me. Okay, so we've got that. Now we can get into this panorama photo here. Over 50 years ago, this is taken from Bird's Eye Mountain, but this photo was taken probably 20 years ago. But over 50 years ago, my dream when I moved back to Vermont, I've always been a Vermonter when I grew up, but I had to leave Vermont for junior high and high school, go to another state. When I came back to Vermont, my dream was that everything you see in that picture, almost everything you see in that picture, I wanted the state of Vermont to own it. The state of Vermont had no interest in it. I bought the Bird's Eye Cliffs. This is taken from the Bird's Eye Mountain, which is inverted 300-foot cliffs. It's one of the best peregrine falcon sites in the state, ranked number 5 usually of all the sites in the state. It's a beautiful, super wild area. The state has done research on it now, and they have found a lot of rare things they don't even want to talk about. That's how rare and unusual this place is. Now, the state finally stepped up to the plate and bought this. Vermonters for Clean Environment worked on it really hard to get the state to own this. Now they absolutely love it, now that they own it. they have done a 20-year long-range plan, just ended last year, to help preserve this place and propagate it for hunting wildlife, the wildlife that hunters normally hunt, bear, deer, partridge, things like that, as well as some of the really wild species like bobcat. This place is full of bobcats. Because of the bobcats, there aren't too many coyotes because they don't get along with each other. They get out of the way. Bobcat will always win against a coyote. But what has happened is they went through several years of research to figure this is a wildlife management area owned by the state. It's different than a wildlife management unit. We have units everywhere in the state. The whole state is nothing but units. But this is an area. It's owned by the Fish and Wildlife Department of the state of Vermont through Pittman Robertson money. Pittman Robertson money, 1937, they decided they had to preserve land in this country because there was very little preserved at that time. So they came up with special tax on guns, ammunition. It's 10% at the wholesale level. We never see it when we go buy a gun or ammo, but it's paid 10%. That's a pretty good tax. And it's been done ever since 1937. And the money from Pittman Robertson is most of what is involved in buying this 3,600 acres here. So this is one of the crown jewels, only 8 miles from the center of Rutland City. And it just feels nice in there, nice and wild. Now, what they did with their long-range plan was excellent. I helped out a little bit with it. And what they did make excellent sense. And this is what I want to go at. You don't want to go one side totally or the other side totally, no logging or all logging. There can be some compromise that makes really good sense, especially on a place like this. What the state decided to do for the 20-year plan is all the steep stuff, and it probably is forever now, all the steep stuff up on the high mountains, it goes way down to, way down into Wells almost. All of this very steep stuff, they decided don't log it again. That was a brilliant idea as far as I'm concerned. The lower lands, log those for the hunters. Now remember, this Pittman Robertson money was made for hunters. That's what it's supposed to buy, land for hunters, mostly, but also for people who like to just enjoy it when hunting season isn't going on. And it was a very nice, you can call it a compromise, but it's actually common sense the way they did it. If you have very steep land, it's hard to log anyway. I wouldn't think a logger would want to get on a lot of that stuff. He's not going to make a lot of money. He's got to build these roads, then watch out for erosion. He has to do wicked erosion control. He's on very thin soils. It's just a very expensive thing. When you do logging, you do come up with early successional, but it's only temporary for like 8 to 10 years. What I like to see is successional that is continuously maintained. On this Bird's Eye Wildlife Management area, they're talking about continuously maintaining some lowland areas for early successional for the deer and the grouse and other animals, rabbits and whatever. That makes sense. But to just log and then 8 years later, it's not early successional anymore. All the feed value for the animals and wildlife it just goes away. So you have to watch when you hear people talk about, oh, logging creates early successional. What I've been telling even the federal government is to create early successional and continuously maintain it. We have done that at my relative's camp. We have 20 acres with apple trees, planted apple trees, let the brush grow up under the limbs, keep a 3-year rotation of cutting it. You should see the wildlife come into that place. And the wildlife gets way out on, this is all surrounded by national forest. The wildlife spends time up in the national forest during the daytime, and everybody's happy. It's a wonderful, I'd recommend in the state and the federal government do this all over Vermont so that we don't have to worry about logging this stuff. Now, logging also brings on invasives. They love going right up where it's been logged. One of the worst places of invasives we knew this was going to happen was up at Lowell Mountain They logged it all off for the wind turbines and the place is full of invasives right now. They tried herbicides, it didn't work. That's what happens when you do that kind of stuff. So you have to watch the logging. Of course, invasives can go anyway. They can always be there. The forest floor always heats up when you've just logged. You can actually smell the terpenes in a lot of is like a turpentine, like sap out of softwood trees. And that can actually create a forest fire if somebody throws a match. Much easier because it's now wide open for a few years until it grows back. So you have to watch. They always say, oh, you have to log. Out west, maybe you do have to do some more logging to prevent some forest fires because they have huge conifer forests. We don't have huge conifer forests here. Most of ours are deciduous broadleaf trees. And the deciduous broadleaf trees never get hot like those huge conifer forests that they have the fires out west and out in Canada where they burn hundreds of thousands of acres at a time. Fortunately, Vermont does not have that problem. Wildlands. If you leave some land alone, the good thing about wildlands where you let it just keep growing and leave it alone forever is it cools the forest floor. It creates a cathedral. It's like walking into a church cathedral. You see the big ceiling way up there. On a hot day, it's still cool in there. This is what happens when you go through a very mature forest. The canopy is way up there, about 100 feet. And the ground is moist. Even in dry times, it's moist in that kind of woods. There's very little of it in Vermont yet, but I've been in a lot of it. And it is really, I go way, way back. I love getting as deep as I can in the wildest places, both Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. And our wildest place in Vermont is the Aitken Wilderness. And the Aitken Wilderness has not been logged for, I don't know when, but it is really getting good. And I've been in the Aitken Wilderness over 20 times. It's the wildest place in Vermont, beats anything in the Northeast Kingdom. And it creates its own early successional habitat once it gets super mature, because windstorms will bring the trees down. They will actually drop. There's a place down there that I got into a couple of years ago where it's a couple hundred yards wide, and somebody told me it's a mile long, but I know it's several hundred yards long, this place where everything got blown down in this one spot. So that happens naturally. So you have natural early successional if you leave things alone in certain areas. Lots of study was put into the Bird's Eye wildlife management area. Lots of public input. I like to see that around forest areas too. And let's see over here, the Pittman-Robertson Act, we have to watch. I read that bill and it wants to stop logging in a lot of the wildlife management areas that were bought with Pittman-Robertson money. Most of the money was Pittman-Robertson, other sources also. But I think that's illegal to just say no logging. I've heard in other states, they've tried to do something different besides help the hunters out. And because the money is for hunters, so if I was the state, instead of getting embroiled in a bunch of lawsuits over these wildlife management areas, I would leave them alone and let them be managed with these long-term plans as they have been. I think that's for the fish and wildlife areas. This is my idea. The other thing I would do, the state parks, I would say, yeah, you don't have to log those. They're a park after all. And they're made for looking at beautiful big trees. Of course, you're still going to have a lot of that early successional created through windstorms. So sometimes it will get ugly in those. But on state forest lands, what I would do is anything steep, Camel's Hump State Park, leave it alone. Anything that's up on steep, high mountains, things are fragile the higher you go up on mountains. I've been way up on Killington, Little Killington, Shrewsbury Peak. That's down around Rutland County. And you can see how fragile things are. The soil is very, very thin. The growth is extremely slow. You can actually look like a piece of spruce down, a spruce, little spruce trunk. You would think, well, that's probably 5, 10 years old. I actually did one of those and cross-centered a low-growing spruce. It was like 60 years to get to that. And that's fascinating, how slow things grow up there. It is very fragile. Leave it alone. So when you get a higher elevation, so there's plenty of room for us to do leaving things alone. But if we don't compromise, as I've said to a lot of people doing rules and laws around here, if you don't compromise, sometimes you get nothing or very little. So let's go for a lot of no logging, but make this bill so that it is more compromising. Get rid of the idea of, say, no logging on wildlife management areas. Say, yes, we won't log on state parks, and then state forest, down low, logging, steep hillsides, leave those alone, high elevation, leave those alone. That's my idea. And I will tell you one thing about experts. I'm going to give you expert testimony on why you should not believe experts all the time. My stepfather was in federal government, and he pounded this into me growing up, and boy, have I seen it. You have experts who work for federal government or state government. Lots of times they have somebody breathing down their necks who's political up above them. They either twist testimony or they don't give you the full testimony. And one of those that happened to me was the state owns a fish and wildlife shooting range down in Heartland, Vermont. That was so unsafe, I couldn't believe it. People were using full automatic machine guns down there and blowing up over the backstop, blowing all the trees apart. The state got, the town of Heartland is right beyond it, plus the interstate, plus playground, schools, everything. This is in the trajectory kill zone of all these bullets. We learn about it in hunter safety. Every person in the room, there were like 30 some officials, the Fish and Wildlife Department, that told me to go pound sand, that I was wrong. They found an expert who came in and said, well, all the bullets are hitting trees. You can see that. They're not going to be the blue sky between the tree trunks. Huh? So I finally really put my foot down, and they stopped that shooting range and made it safe. That's why you have to watch expert testimony from state and federal government. Very important. That's my presentation.
Thank you. That was great.
Anybody have questions?
So you said you,
And last,
yeah, you still hunt?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do hunt. I'd rather guide people. In fact, over on Birdseye, on state land, I've got a really good deer stand over there, but it's so hard to get to. Nobody ever goes back. When I bring them in, we ain't going back. Now, I'm talking rugged folks. And I have actually injured myself in there getting into it. I fell 11 times one time just getting to this place. But I took this young fellow in, and he had just had a kidney transplant. So I got him in there, and here comes a 4-pointer, opening day. He had 4 chances to shoot this thing, walking slowly by him. And I'm looking at him. I didn't bring a gun. He's got the gun. He didn't pull the trigger. I'm happy. He was happy. He didn't want to. That's good. Hunting is not about killing. It is about getting out there. And half the time it's just seeing what's going around and going by. I've had chances to play with bobcats where they try to sneak around. They always know you're there too, but they'll sneak around and look at you. And it's quite entertaining if you sit quietly and just observe.
Just, we don't have a lot of time because to get to the floor, but there's a bill that we have is considering bringing back, doing a feasibility study about bringing back the catamount. I was wondering if you could just quickly.
Yeah, I just talked to a person who's on that side out there. We get along very well. This is what I recommend to everybody. When I was on the Fish and Wildlife Board, I would reach out to the other side. Other board members wouldn't. This is so important to do, to reach out to the other side. And like I was just talking out here for about 20 minutes to one who's on normally the other side. Catamounts, it won't work. And there's a lot of non-hunters who would be horrified by the idea because they will eat people under certain circumstances. The only thing I tell people, like I told somebody today, catamounts and wolves hate eating people because they have to pull the clothing off first. Otherwise, it bungs up their bowels.
That's a good one.
But anyway, I would not reintroduce wolves. I would not reintroduce catamounts. Let's just leave this alone. And on the other side, the state wants to charge non-hunters $5 a day and $20 a season for walking on these wildlife management areas. That will go nowhere. I don't know why. People got to think a little deeper and wider to see what actually can happen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Really enjoyed it.
Okay?
You want this back?
Yeah.